All right, Madam Chair, you are now live on the live web stream. We can go ahead and get started whenever you like.
Thank you very much, Randy. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Governors Integrations Update Workshop. So we are webcasting this workshop in order that everyone who is interested in our integration efforts can hear the same update that we, the board, and our other guests are hearing today. We're also going to be archiving it online so people can view it later if they wish to. Along with board members here today, we've invited university presidents, the chancellor and his team, the leadership of PACT, and other leaders to join us. I believe APSCUF and possibly AFSCME and other leaders. So welcome very much. We're delighted to have you here. Because this is a workshop and not an official meeting, we do not need to do a roll call. But I do want to acknowledge that our wonderful Tom Muller has now completed his service as a board member, and we will miss his leadership. Tom was part of the executive committee and for many years chaired the University Success Committee. Well, we're going to take time at the July meeting to properly honor him. And as we say goodbye to one board member, we have the pleasure and honor of welcoming another. So now joining our board is Mr. Bob Bogle, who was most recently the longtime chair of the Cheney University Council of Trustees. And we're really, truly delighted to have him join the board, and we'll formally welcome him at our next official board meeting. So today we're going to spend the bulk of our time receiving an update on the integrations effort, focusing on public comment received thus far, and also getting more details about the public hearings that are set for next month. Today's briefing is intended to provide board members with more information about the integrations work that is underway. And we want everyone on the board, obviously, to feel well prepared for discussions when the updated integration plans come back to the board in July. So as a reminder, as Randy has already stated, today's session is a workshop. It is not an official meeting. That means no board actions will be taken today. It also means that board members are free to ask questions of the chancellor and his team, but may not deliberate about any issues. That means we will not be making any statements. Any individuals will not be making any statements regarding opinions about a particular issue, or to respond to other board members' questions or comments. So to get us started, let me turn this over to Dan to lead the briefing.
Thanks so much, and thanks everybody for your time. Randy, if we just jump immediately to the screen, so obviously this is a deck and it integrates, and if we just go right to the introduction. So I'm just gonna, a very brief reminder of integrations, what's it all about, why, what, and how, and then a brief kind of overview of what we've been doing since April 28th, and the board vote to approve the plans for the purposes of moving into public review and comment, talk a little bit about the public comment process, and then spend most of the time here really on the themes that we're pulling out of the public comment process, and then how we're responding to them by integrating them as changes to the report and as evolutions. And then I'll turn to Randy for a quick overview of the June hearings, which are coming up in a couple of weeks. So obviously treat this as a seminar, not a lecture. So please chime in with questions as and where you have them. And obviously, as Cindy's already said, this will be made available to the public. So if there are issues you want to bring up after you've kind of reviewed the material later on, obviously don't hesitate to be in touch, and we will certainly help where we can. So that's the plan. Randy, if you go to slide 3, the next slide. Great. So again, to review why integrations, and we've really done everything we can to draw from various decks that we've presented in the past. There are, this has really been a consistent process with respect to its purpose and its orientation. Really very little has changed since earliest considerations in terms of the direction and the rationale, but just to run through it. So you may remember these slides from the July board meeting of last year of 2020, when we reviewed really in light of our sustainability planning process, in light of what we were then seeing emerging from the sustainability planning activities, really in advance, although obviously things accelerated with the pandemic. We really began to recognize that in certain of our institutions where enrollments were seriously challenged, it really begins, absent significant additional state funding or tuition-based funding, which of course is challenging in our circumstances, it becomes very difficult for low-enrolled schools to sustain the kind of breadth of academic programming and student supports and services that they require based on the revenues that they have. And the model that works so well in sustaining any college university, whether public or private, where virtually the whole host of academic programs and student supports and all the activities that are sort of centered around a university or a college are sustained by a combination of revenues, begins to unravel. And that's particularly challenging for low-enrolled schools, obviously. And it's particularly challenging in the kinds of communities and the kinds of students that our low-enrolled schools serve, particularly in the rural parts of Pennsylvania, where communities rely on our universities, not just for jobs, which are obviously very important, but also for the full breadth of, business and leaders and teachers and healthcare professionals, et cetera. That our universities in those regions really need to maintain a comprehensive breadth of programming, not just in service to the students. And again, in many of our rural parts, it's easy to say, well, students will just go somewhere else. They don't. And survey after survey of rural America suggests that that's so. So if, to avoid creating, kind of college deserts, which are sort of devoid of opportunities for students and communities to have access to the full breadth of academic programming and professional kind of training that our universities provide, that it becomes really important to think about how to combine them in ways so that students can have the best of both worlds, right? The full opportunity, the full access to a comprehensive set of programs, but at the same time, the unique kinds of experiences that are available from a residential university. So that was the logic that we presented to the board in July that sort of triggered the evaluation of possible integrations per Act 50. So if we go to the next slide, Randy, just remind us of the emerging, the why sort of covered most of it. It's so that we can sustainably operate comprehensive universities and a lot of good things, and I remember again in the July slide, if you'll go refer to it, the goals that were presented. The first one was expand opportunity, expand student opportunity, because that is the driver of what we are about and what this process is about. And of course, through the process, and this became apparent in October after the financial review in particular, and then continued to sort of to emphasize these points. We discovered through the work in the financial review that integration wasn't just about expanding access to broad array of programs. There were real opportunities to reinvent ourselves, particularly with respect of the way we supported our students. There was an opportunity through integration and the kind of transformation that it required to look holistically across our universities and to, aggressively begin to think, how could we do things better in the interests of our students, in the interest of their performance? And, I think one of the things, and I said this at our last meeting, that excites me most about the integration plans is the student success work. Our student success working groups really, did exactly what you'd expect of professionals who are committed to the welfare and well-being of our students and the communities that they come from. They took an opportunity to redesign us around the students and communities of the future. And it's, profound, it's very exciting, frankly. So there's the why. Let's just go, Randy, maybe to the next slide, and you'll have seen this one too. Actually, again, it's a Franken slide combined from the deck that we presented in several times now. So the what is integration? So that was the model that we launched out with. What would it mean to bring universities together under a single accreditation with a single leadership structure, et cetera? And what does it mean for our students? Here was the real the opportunity to think about combining the best of both worlds, students gaining a full residential experience for those who wish to have that sort of thing, with the full range of academic programs, and again, with a retooled set of student supports. And then finally to the how, to slide 6. And here again, you'll see a slide that slides that we've used consistently throughout. The process that we're following is prescribed by Act 50, which passed the General Assembly with all but 3 votes in favor in June of last year and was signed by the governor. And obviously we're in that period, in that third column, the April to July period. The board has considered the plans and approved it for the purposes of launching a 60-day public review and comment period. You know, the plan, the work has been done inclusively and transparently. I know there's been a great deal of discussion on this point. And I keep asking people, you know, if this isn't inclusive and transparent, please tell us what is so we can course correct going forward. But, you know, and I've said this before and I'll say it here, you know, we've looked far and wide across this, you know, higher education generally, and we've just not seen a kind of ground up process like we conducted here. These integration work is typically conducted in by leadership, and you know, others are invited to participate perhaps at a very advanced stage. That's not the case here. You know, we've put everything we have on the web, including the plans. You know, my network nationally is very thankful that now there is some material that people can refer to when they're looking at them, but it's just a testimony to the fact that, you know, we take our work in this regard incredibly seriously. And as you'll see through the, you know, through the responses to public themes and comments, really interested in if people have, you know, if people can think about how to correct and improve, it would be super helpful for folks to tell us. And obviously, you know, we have 500,000 alumni, you know, 93,000, you know, student head count. So yeah, we can't talk to everybody, but I think we try. We're certainly committed to trying. So I really wanted to make that point. Okay, Randy, if you take us on to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about what's happened since the board meeting on April 28th. Before I go on, I should ask any questions on the sort of the what, why, and how. Gosh, I hope no surprises.
And board members, if you have any questions, you can just use your raise hand feature, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, or you can send a chat to me and I'll call on you. All right, no hands.
Great, hearing none, I'll press on. So since April 28th, there's obviously been a lot of things going on. Most of those boxes, frankly, have our activities that have taken place at the university and regional levels. Obviously, I've been involved in you know, various state level works, Senate House hearings, and you know, meetings with the governor and governor staff, et cetera. But the union leadership, but a lot of the community-based, constituency-based work has been happening at the universities and in the regions that the university is being considered for consolidation. So in the province of the 4 presidents who were all here and able to take questions, but obviously very extensive work, town hall meetings and tea parties, I understand, in the West, and really opportunities to go deeper into the various aspects of the plans that stakeholders are interested in. So I'm grateful to the presidents and their teams for undertaking that work and for gathering input through those channels. Randy, if we go to the next slide, let me talk a little bit about how the process has worked. So what we've been doing is we obviously gather the comments that we're receiving, whether in emails or through our websites or through hearings or meetings, and we're just sort of entering them into a, you know, a central point. And then, you know, periodically our teams are sort of pawing through them and, you know, looking for actionable items and things that, you know, themes that are emerging, et cetera. And figuring out how we can respond to and integrate the comments that are being made. It's happening in an ongoing way. Today we're going to share with you, you know, the themes that we've seen emerge so far and the responses that that we're proposing to them. And we'll do this once more at the end of June. And obviously that will also include obviously new content that we get from folks, new ideas, new issues, and also anything we hear through the public hearings that Randy will speak about in a few moments. And so the idea is that when you get to a meeting in July 14th, July 15th, and you see a revised plan, and I'll go to the structure of that revised plan in a second. There shouldn't be any surprises. You will be kept up to date along the way of what people are saying, and the kind of issues that they're raising, and how we're being responsive to those issues. And so that's the process that we're engaging in. Obviously, this deck and the material that we're presenting to you will also be made available on the web, so that it can itself be part of our inclusive and transparent process. And so we'll invite comment here as well. And Randy, I see the Senator Schwank has raised her hand.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Dan. So you talked about this public comment process, and I think you're getting into what I'm going to ask about. Will there be something on a website that actually outlines the comments that people, the raw comments that were offered, and then a separate space or page where we talk about how some of these comments can be integrated into the plan? I think it's really important for people to see that their perspective is at least being seen and acknowledged.
Yeah. So hold that thought, Senator, because we're going to show you how that second part, the response. And so if you can see ways to improve upon what we're going to show you, please let us know. So that's going to be super important. And obviously, everything that we receive is a public record. And because we're a public agent, well, we're not an agency, but because we're a public entity, everything we do is open to the public, and that's a good thing. Okay. So, Senator, I'm going to come back to you after, and Randy, you'll remind me in case I forget. Hold me accountable. After we flip through the slides that address those issues, I'm going to come back to you, Senator, and ask whether or not this is the kind of thing you're thinking about in terms of sort of publicizing, if you like, how comments are being integrated into the report. Okay, if you go on to slide 9, just quickly, this is what we're thinking, and again, open for input here. This is what we're thinking about how to manage how to submit the sum total of everything we receive. So obviously you'll see what you're going to see in a moment is a kind of here's a list of themes that have emerged, and here's how we're responding to them, and that of course will be available, and then there'll be another one of these in June. But in July, what we're proposing to do is to submit a revised plan. You can read that revised plan with track changes, so you can see every change that was made to it, or you can read it, a clean version of it, so the track changes are suppressed, and then you'll see a longer list of what we're going to present here, which is kind of a guide to here's the themes that we saw, and here's the responses that we made. And if, depending on how it goes, we'll also try to sort of point to the pages where those responses are included. So people have 3 different ways to kind of see how comments, how themes were how issues were addressed, and where they were addressed, what the issues were, what the response was, and what the result is in terms of the. Okay. So quick summary, this is what we've seen so far, 299 comments or issues that have been recorded at various meetings, etc. A lot of them, as you'll see, are really just viewpoints. This is great, this is not so good, this is terrible, whatever. So they're not actionable, they're important, but they don't raise issues that are addressable in terms of changes to the plan or to the FAQs. A bunch of comments do, about 10% at the very top, and frankly, they're all important. These are particularly important, I think, because there's, have you ever thought about, or I don't understand that, could you clarify? And we're going to focus on those coming up in a minute. And then some of them are they don't actually affect the plan, but they reflect the fact that we could do better communicating various aspects of the plan. And so the impacts that they have are super important. They show up in FAQs, they show up on our website, where we're making information available. They show up in the, how we communicate about the context, rationale, et cetera. So that's the way we have addressed these. And obviously, again, the comments themselves are part of a public record, and if folks wish to go in and come up with their own categorization, that's of course up to them.
And Representative Briggs, I see, has a hand up.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chancellor. Is there anywhere on the public, I think those actionable suggestions are very valuable. I've been trying to communicate to everyone I talk to about being involved and offer suggestions. Is there anywhere on the website that actually requests that instead of it just being the public comment section? Is there an encouragement for
that? Yeah,
Sorry.
That's a great, Randy, do you know, I mean, I certainly, like you, Representative Briggs, as you know, when I'm speaking in public, I encourage, I think I may even be begging for those, the concrete suggestions. But Randy, that's a great, do we have that specifically on the website where we're inviting? And if we don't, we should.
Yeah, we can check the language where the website asks for your public comment. And if it doesn't drive people to more actionable, we can absolutely do that. Yep.
And please, as you're working with your own constituents and constituencies, yeah, if you could also help us communicate that message. And I don't want to do anything to diminish the value of other kinds of comments. Everything is super important. But with respect to the kind of the purposes of, as I understand it, of Act 50 and the transparency and the inclusive nature of the process, it's the actionable stuff which really helps us focus.
Yeah, right now, when you go in and offer public comment, you can do it through email or through mail, or there is a web form on the website. And that's where most of these comments have actually come through. More than probably 250 of them have come through the web form. And it asks you to indicate which plan you want to comment on. Is there a category of information, students, faculty, staff, alumni, and donor, or rather ask you what your role is as a student, faculty, staff, or donor. And then it asks you to provide comments that you'd like for us to consider. We could certainly in that line right there say, and we encourage you to provide, actionable suggestions that could lead to plan changes. That's a great suggestion, Representative Briggs. We'll do that.
Thank you very much.
And Senator Schwenk, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks again. I agree with Representative Briggs. And I, again, will go back to the fact that when I talk to people, they want a really easy way to be able to offer their comments, and they want to be acknowledged for it in some way. So is there any kind of response that you've received this? Are there any names, if people offer them, attached to their commentary? People feel like they own this. They own the system. They should own the integration plan too, right? It shouldn't just be a Board of Governors initiative. So I think it's really important that we, really drive into the actual changes that people suggest and how they are incorporated. I will just keep emphasizing that and let it go at that, but it's important.
I'll take advice on this question. So we have not attached names, and they're not always available, but there's another reason, and that is because, there are people who don't submit their names, obviously, but there's also, we want to encourage people to speak in a public, again, everything that's sent to us is a public record, but which we have been very self-conscious in a lot of issues address the same, a lot of comments will address the same issues, so we group them up. But if, obviously if, and I'm a little concerned that we haven't advertised to folks that maybe their names will be revealed in public.
Well, at least are we acknowledging, or are they getting a return email to say we've received your comments and
yes,
and
when you fill out
be reviewed?
Yeah, when you fill out the web form, you get an acknowledgement that we've received the information. And then likewise, if an email comes to us, we respond saying, your email has been received. It is going to be included in the compilation of all the public comments that will be provided to the Board of Governors. And again, of the 299 that we're seeing, the vast majority are coming through the web form, which makes it actually very easy for the user, but it also makes it easy on the analysis side, which Dan's going to talk about here shortly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on then to the issues themselves, to the comments, the themes that have emerged. So we've grouped these in, again, this is really editorial editorial convenience, we've grouped the comments in a way that, directly relate to the structure of the plan, so that in a way we'll know where to go when we make the changes, and the public will know where they will find those changes. So I'll just tick through them, and I'm not going to go through this. It's a relatively long list. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll go through a bunch. So, obviously, with respect to student impacts, one of the things we've heard about, is, have we spoken to students? And of course we have. We did a number of things both in the Northeast and the West, and we'll, in terms of asking students specifically about for input, and we'll include that input in the report as an appendix. But more importantly, we will, build on. We've commissioned a survey, a piece of our early kind of high-level market research to assess, student response to the kind of the critical value proposition of integration is that, that we can give students the best of both worlds, a comprehensive program array, plus the benefits of a fully engaged residential experience, and with some amount of hybrid learning. And so, really test the water with respect to student response to that. And we'll be looking broadly at students across the states, not just in Pennsylvania state system schools, but focusing in publics generally. So that survey result should be available, Randy or Sharon, I'm not sure. It's late June, early July.
Early July.
Early July. So that's been super helpful. Look forward to seeing that going forward. I want to hop to the next slide. Community is another section. So obviously here a lot of commentary on the economic impact study. Here there has been, and I think this is an example of a kind of a theme that has emerged, which is important for us, both in terms of how we present information, we talk about the work, where there are opportunities to clarify in the communication that there's a distinction between sustainability planning on the one hand, which is really our response to enrollment decline, and that is going to happen. It is a consequence of enrollment decline, and it is a consequence of enrollment decline that actually integration is conceived of to address. So we will have commissioned the same group that did the economic impact study back in 2015. We'll be updating it and looking at really in two parts. What's the consequence of enrollment decline? Part A, and then B, and that'll run to 2022 through FY 21-22. And then B, what's the impacts of integration in terms of the projection? So there'll be two components. So it'll be possible to sort of tease out what's the impact of integration. Very modest. What's the impact of enrollment decline? Somewhat more impactful. So we'll see that specifically. That'll be professionally done by a group that does economic impact studies, community impact studies, and that is already familiar with the Pennsylvania state system. So if you want to go to the next slide, Randy, bunch of issues have been raised, comments on governance. And again, all good and important stuff. We had leadership group, we had working groups that focused in both regions on leadership and governance, and focused specifically on the composition of councils of trustees. And we debated extensively about what to do with their recommendations. I think they're about, they looked into a future state, and they thought about, the composition and operation of a council of trustees for an integrated university. What should it look like in the long term? And there was a variety of different options that were recommended. Any one of those options, because the councils of trustees are defined statutorily, any one of those options would require statutory change. So it's not really in the board's purview anyway. So at the end of the day, we did not include them in the first version of the plan. We will include them in the second version, along with a discussion about what happens from here should the board determine to go forward with integration, what would happen to the council of trustees. And again, any change in the structure, any of the recommendations that those leadership working groups have made would require statutory intervention. So what would happen if there's, what does that look like? Or what happens if there is no statutory process to revise Act 188. What would that look like? So we'll include both those that information in the revised report. Some clarification is also really important. Some confusion about is seen in the comments about affiliates, and are affiliates going to be impacted in any way by integration? And I mean, the answer is no. There's no, the board has no authority over affiliates. They're separate 501c3 organizations. So obviously we'll need to amplify that in the report to address that. Obviously we weren't clear enough on that point. And then there's been, some discussion, including, I believe, at the board meeting in April about, whether or not closure was a possibility. It isn't. I mean, closure of an institution is only possible for the General Assembly. We've been through that a couple of times now in public comment, but we'll make it very clear in the report that an integrated entity simply cannot cease operations at one of its campuses. It would require the board to act beyond its authority, and so would continue to require legislative action to cease operations of any of our campuses. But that's obviously a really important point, and we'll make sure that that is also addressed in the plan. Great. You want to go to the 14, I think, or the next slide, which is organization. Great. So just a bunch of issues about what campus leadership looks like, and there again, the working groups have addressed these issues. We'll include that in the plan. Here's a trailer. The idea, of course, is that each integrated entity will have a president, and a president will have a leadership team, and leadership teams will be made up of the same kind of functional portfolios you'd expect to see in any university's leadership team: chief academic officer, et cetera. The idea is that three members of each leadership team would double up each as a leader in their functional area, but also serve as a kind of in a campus executive role to sort of be the person on campus who's available to the community, to the Council of Trustees, as a person who is immediately there when the president is otherwise engaged, so that every campus has that kind of identifiable person to sort of play really important, critically important roles in that regard. So we'll clarify that as well in the report, which I hope will be useful. And then Randy, if you want to hop to the next one, thanks.
We've got a question from Representative Briggs.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chancellor. And I just want to go back to the previous slide about the campus closures, and or maybe the,
sure,
maybe the one before that.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not going to deliberate, and I'm not going to say something that will cause me problems in the future. But do other schools, and maybe this is directed to President Fiorentino, I kind of recall Westchester having a campus in Philadelphia. I mean, maybe it wasn't actually called a campus. I'm cautious that how we word this, I don't want it to affect other operations of campuses, of institutions that do have satellite campuses that might require action to adjust. And I know I brought this up at the board meeting about the concern, but at some point, campuses do have to be governed and managed by the trustees. So I just kind of wanted to mention that as maybe a question. I don't know. I'm sorry. But do other of our institutions that are not in the integration have branch campuses? Do we know?
Yes, the answer is yeah. I don't know. The campus in Philly actually has been shared by multiple institutions. We have most of the classes there at this point, but there are quite a few branch campuses around the system. I don't know if I can name them all, but there certainly are. So
that would just be my concern, is if we put something in this plan that might satisfy an immediate concern, but but could cause complications in the future. All right, that's up to you.
Yeah, no, that's a great, President Driscoll, I see you've raised your hand and hopefully you, go ahead.
I appreciate the question. Just to answer directly, IUP has two regional campuses that we own at this point. The board approved potential transfer of one of those at its meeting in the middle of April, and that's moving through the process, not that we're limiting our academic presence. It seems to me that there is a nomenclature issue here related to what's a university, what's a campus, what's a regional campus, and Middle States nomenclature, as I recall it. We may just be able to dig into that and refine the language being used to put the right words to associate with the right concerns. I would hate to see our flexibility at IUP impacted by unintentionally by wrong language. That's not quite an opinion, but trying to answer your question.
Yeah, that was where I was. Thank you, President Driscoll, and thank you, President Fiorentina.
Yeah, that's super helpful, and I'm going to suggest that we turn we invite our legal colleagues, Andy and team, to help advise us about how to do that, to make sure that we're clear in the use of language and that the prohibition includes things, I'm making this up, but that once had standing in Act, or that were defined in Act 188, and in the way that the branch campuses are not. But that's a really important point.
And to your point, Dan, that can be built into any motion that the board would ultimately need to approve. So it would allow you to limit it just to the integrations thing and not open the can of worms like you suggested, Representative Briggs, relative to other branch campuses.
So can I suggest on that point that we treat this, that we honor our process, we treat this as input, and that we come back to our next, which will be June, and we will include this as a comment, and we'll have a response to it so we can come up with some options. This is super important.
Thank you, James.
Great. Okay. Let's go to finances, financial section 10 of the report. So a couple of things, have emerged. Some of them are, again, and you'll see that there's variety. Some of these issues are, they're clarification, they're relatively straightforward. Others involve some significant work. All that's good. So we're engaging a third-party review of the financial projections. We'll clarify. There's some questions about the West and when it reaches sort of a positive net revenue, so we'll clarify that. There's been questions raised about where specifically projected cost savings come from, so we'll clarify that. And then there's been a lot of conversation, very helpfully, and now increasingly within the General Assembly and the Governor's Office about where sort of additional funding supports, what levels of additional funding supports might be necessary. So what we're trying to do already at this stage is to really, how much money do you need is a really tough, is a harder question to answer than you would imagine, because the question is for what? And so we're trying to identify the kinds of various goals that a board might pursue, and then the level of funding that would achieve those goals. So a couple of examples, what would it take to get the West, which takes 6 years to get to net positive revenues, what would it take to get them there in 2 years? Or how much would we require to eliminate so that we could simply divide state appropriated dollars in some ways that reflected student FTE? What would that cost be to eliminate the need for cross subsidy? Or, frankly, my passion is, what would it take to reduce the cost, the total net price of attendance that our students pay? So that, you can look at different objectives and think, okay, what's required to achieve these objectives? So that's what we'll be pulling together. And obviously, as we have conversations around the budget, around potential use of stimulus dollars, we have been refining that thinking and using the kind of conversation to address those various different, to identify those various different goals. So that's been very helpful, and we would expect to include that as well in the summary of that work in the final version of the report. second slide on financial issues. There is some new information that's available to us that wasn't available when the reports were written, so we'll obviously include that. Our understanding of not the amount, but the use of the latest stimulus dollars is obviously now much better than it was when we produced the report the first time, and obviously the board has made a tuition decision. So we'll update the financial projections to include that new information. Actually, this probably belongs in the item on the last page. There's been a lot of work on debt service pressures, financial pressures that debt service, particularly in the West, but many of our universities creates, and also about the level of deferred maintenance funding. So, urgent need and where that need is met and unmet. So that will also be included as part of that summary of options that identify specific goals and the level of funding required to achieve those goals.
And President Driscoll has his hand up.
I would just ask that we include non-integrating universities in the discussions going on with this last topic if we're not. So maybe I'll form a question there. Are we including all the universities in those discussions?
We have, so we're pulling together the information. And so we are certainly, all that information is available to us and has been made available to our interlocutors in the General Assembly and the Governor's office. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think we're up to the to slide 17, to the process updates. So this is where I have an opportunity. In fact, Randy, if we could go to the next slide, slide 18 on this. So the other thing that's sort of beginning to emerge, and I want to give a shout out to a student, Nick, who has been a very faithful correspondent and has identified all sorts of great ideas about, different kinds of academic programs we might consider and different kinds of partnerships with respect to youth and young adult programmings, different ways of leveraging our scale, et cetera. So we'll kind of create, these kind of go beyond the scope of the plan and the board. They're things that teams in the regions at universities being considered for integration would want to consider should the board, decide to move to implementation. And so where we get advice on different kinds of approaches to the academic program rate, et cetera, actually new programs that ought to be considered or new ideas, those will be communicated and made available. They will be in the plan, but they will also be available to the teams of any integrated university. And I see Senator Schwank has her hand up.
Thank you for recognizing me, Chancellor. Under the academic line item here, one of the things that I've heard in my caucus and in some of the emails that I've received are questions about the enrollment projections going forward and whether they're realistic or not. So one of the things that that I think might fit under this, which could be expanded, is our relationship with community colleges and
Right.
how we can really ramp that up. Frankly, I feel this would be my comment that we ought to, offer a little more detail about that and really talk about a proactive plan to make those linkages with community colleges.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we're doing, as you know, we're doing a lot of work in that regard, both for the system level and at the integrated, the universities being considered for integration. So great, let's include that. And again, I think let's treat that as we did Representative Briggs' recommendation. Let's treat that as sort of a formal input to the process, and we'll come back in the June version of this conversation with that new line and response. It's great.
to the presidents that are there, and I see Dr. Hawkinson is there. Good morning, Ken. I know that this has been an initiative that all of you have taken, but I sometimes think the public doesn't recognize that. And I also think that there just could be a more enhanced effort if we're really going to try to reach those targets.
Randy, could I respond to Senator?
Yeah.
Senator, just by coincidence, a number of the presidents have a meeting with Donna Wilson this afternoon to go through a number of initiatives, wherein we can have much easier pathways from the community colleges to the universities. So I'm expecting that we're going to make great progress on this very soon.
It should be in the plan. That's great news. Thank you, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I'll just, to my team, I'm going to think out loud, which I know is dangerous, but there's issues, including the one that President Driscoll raised, where our plan is going to have to reflect momentum that is happening across the system with specific reference to the implications for the integration plan. So we will figure that out. Okay. And if we go back now to slide 17, and the rationale is that now Senator Schwank, because this will be the last slide of these themes and responses, I just want to call out that top line. So we have created this process for analyzing public comment and thinking about how to include, a commentary and respond to commentary in a way that actually reflects the substance of the plan. And this is where I was going to remind myself to just ask you whether, this approach, obviously you're not seeing it yet edited into the plan, but this in effect becomes the kind of, change order or change list and of course we'll build on it over the next month or so. But is this the kind of thing that you were thinking about? Ways you can think of our, improving upon? So really, let me hate to put you on the spot, but turn to you for that.
No, I'm happy to offer my input, obviously. This says what we need to do. I just want to be sure that we do it in a way that is very, use that overused word, transparent or easy for people to access and see, that we actually are listening and implement and incorporating, I guess is the word, some of the suggestions that they are making.
Yeah.
That's what I'm driving at.
Yeah, totally important. And again, just to emphasize, for anyone listening, and the point that Representative Briggs raised, again, I think you'll see from this review that it is the comments that make substantive recommendations. They're just so valuable. There's so many things there's so many moving parts, and we have so many super smart and passionate and caring people to take that extra moment to say, have you ever thought about, or what about? And then to make that, ask the question or make that recommendation is so important, because it gives us something then, and it gives the teams really something to sort of chew on and to think about. And it allows us to evolve the plans in a way that, makes sense. And to the point that Senator Schwank made, enables us to develop as much as possible the kind of co-ownership that we're going to need in our future direction, should the board decide to go forward with integration. Okay, Randy, if you hop to slide 19, I'm going to turn it over to you. We're just going to have a quick overview of what we're thinking about for the public hearings. And again, obviously look forward to input.
Great, thank you. And as you know, Act 50 talks about public hearings for any potential integration plans. It doesn't really define what those are. So we tried to imagine what would be the most useful for us. And the most useful is to actually just provide opportunity for members of our stakeholder groups, the members of the public, to share their thoughts with us about the plans. And so we want to make as much time available during those hearings for that. As you know, and you've all been participants in other hearings can be different things. They could be panelists talking about various items and making presentations, and then Q&A, or they could be anything really in this regard. We decided to make this really a listening opportunity for the board members so that we could hear directly from those who want to share their thoughts and ideas. So we're approaching each hearing that it'll be about a 90-minute hearing, though we have some flexibility to go longer if needed for each one. There'll be a short opener just to kind of provide context and set the stage for the day, maybe 5-7 minutes by the chancellor. And then we're going to treat the next part very much like we do our public comment in a board meeting, where anybody who wants to talk about this can log into the webinar, Zoom webinar, and click the raise hand feature, and we'll call on them, and they can talk for 2 minutes, they can make a comment, they can pose a question, and then they will move on to the next person. If they do pose questions, we're not intending to in that moment answer the question, because that would take up more of the hearing time, and you could very easily burn up half of the hearing time just answering questions. Instead, we'll capture those questions and we will respond to them in the way that we have been, or we will react to them in the way we have been in the public comment collection process. But also at the end of the hearing, we're going to provide about 10 minutes for the Chancellor, President Hanna, and President Pearson to sort of summarize what they may have heard and to be able to sort of respond sort of in large meta-level themes to what they heard, so that we can acknowledge that we've heard it and that we will be incorporating this into the overall analysis of public comment. The hearings will be webcast, all 4 of them, and recorded. So if people are curious to hear what was said in a hearing they did not attend, they can go back to our YouTube channel and watch that. We're doing them intentionally early morning and late afternoon so that we can kind of straddle different working periods. Some people around the Commonwealth may be working more in the afternoon, and so that they would have their mornings free and vice versa. And we're also doing it over 2 different days so that if people have routines that happen every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, well, they have an opportunity for a Thursday hearing and vice versa. Some have asked, what is the role of the various players during the hearing? And so we want to share with you our thoughts there. For you, the board members, you've already received the information about these hearings, so it's on your calendars already, and we encourage you to attend all 4 of them if you can. Know that if there is 1 or 2 that you're not able to attend live via Zoom or by watching the YouTube, you can go back and rewatch the hearing on our YouTube channel. So we want to make sure that the board members have access to all 4 hearings and the content from all 4 hearings. As I said before, your role as a board member is to listen and consider all of the comments. And board members are not, just like we do in public comment, board members are not to respond to or engage in discussion with each other during the public comment period or with anybody else during the public comment period. The Chancellor and the Presidents who will be participating, Chancellor and President who will participating that day will have the same responsibility, listen to the comments, and then the only interaction really would be toward the end of the period where President Pearson, President Hanna, and Chancellor Greenstein could provide some contextualizing information if it seems helpful and appropriate. It was an interesting conversation because we want this, like we said, we want to preserve as much time as possible to hear people. And so we don't want to create a sense that this is a Q&A, because that would burn up a lot of time, but we do want to be able to give a sense to hear people's comments. So Representative Briggs.
Thank you, Randy. And there's been a lot of questions I've received from my caucus about the public hearing aspect during the public comment period. I am a little concerned that 90 minutes with a little bit of other agenda items and 2 minutes per comment is really limiting, or at least the perception that it could be limiting. I think we should be welcoming all public comment, and if it's going to take longer than 90 minutes, we should listen. And I do think there should be a plan to, as Senator Schwank has said, to respond to those comments. Maybe not at the hearing itself, but if people took the time to comment, they should get a response to what they said. So. I understand we added a morning and afternoon two days, but I think the 90 minutes might be a little bit limiting. And if it looks that way, maybe the last one we could just take the end time off or extend it a little bit. So I do think this is a valuable opportunity to listen to people, and I just don't want to give that perception that we're keeping it too tight. Thanks, Randy.
You bet, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, Mr. Briggs, I really appreciate that comment. And I think that, while I don't want it to encourage, long monologues, endless, sort of speaking time for anybody who wants to speak. I mean, I do think that people ought to be able to make their points in a somewhat concise way, and 2 minutes is, I think, reasonable. However, we will not be, there won't be some guy with a cane, hooking somebody off the stage. And also, I think that if it does extend beyond the 90 minutes, we definitely would let it go. I can give you that guarantee. We're not going to cut this off. We want to hear what people think and have to say. And we'll even consider, if it's really overwhelming and we need to schedule another one, we'll do it. We'll do what's necessary so that people have a chance to be heard. And more importantly, we have a chance to hear what people think, because we are open to ideas.
Thank you, Cindy. And as said, President, I agree. I think 2 minutes, if people know, I think that is, they could express themselves efficiently in 2 minutes. I wasn't too worried about that aspect. But if it's 10 minutes at the end and 80 minutes of testimony or comment, that's 40 people. So if there's, if it looks like there's going to be more than 160 people in those 4 things, I would hope we would give another opportunity or extend it. So I think we are on the same page with that thought, and I appreciate your commitment to not ending it if there's still people in the queue. Thank you.
And we'll go to Governor Smith. Before you do, Governor Smith, just a logistical point, Representative Briggs. The good thing about the format we're using, or the platform we're using, the web Zoominar, we'll be able to see right at the beginning how many people are interested in speaking. And so if in one session, for example, we have 3 people who are interested in speaking at that point, we can actually even flex on the 2-minute side if need be. And so we can kind of gauge. And if we have 200 people, then we can right up front say, okay, we're not going to be able to get to all 200, in the 9-hour session. And we can help moderate and encourage, people to speak accordingly.
Randy, you're cheating
Governor Smith.
You're cheating a little bit. You're halfway answering my question before I get to ask it. I was going to ask, are people being encouraged at all to pre-register for these, or like to at least give you advance notice? I know with our IUP public comment period, our regular board meetings, since we've been online a lot, we use that kind of a function to manage that, so that they're supposed to, let us know they want to talk. And then we sort of have an idea. Now, nobody's been commenting lately, so it's hard to tell what it's like, but I'm just wondering if they could be asked to register ahead of time, or at least notify us, so you could have some way to manage that, as opposed to just turning the webinar on and suddenly seeing there's 100 people saying, I want to speak today. That causes a problem, I think, if you had that surprise, because maybe it was their only, one of the meeting schedules that they could join, and how you manage it. So I think I'd give some consideration to that, or if it's possible, technology-wise and all.
We'll give that some thought. We have actually thought about that in the past as we all went to COVID, and how the board has treated. We've had that option where you could request somebody to pre-register for public comment. We tried to treat our public comment period as a board as close to how we would in a regular board meeting, which is the day of, anyone can show up and just comment. And there are certain risks to that in terms of time management, but we can certainly look at that. Thanks.
Yeah, I respect that. I mean, there's no perfect answer to this. I think even if it was just not like you're going to force them to come ahead of time. You're not, given that option. It's just and I think it can even be stated that way, just so that we can properly manage the time and all. I think it's worth at least getting some people, on the list, if you will, and maybe you give them priority for doing it. They get to speak earlier than just waiting in line. If it turns out that there are, tons and tons of public comment. So
I like that.
I think it's worth consideration.
Yeah, and I want to echo what the speaker said. I gave comment at the gaming commission regarding my local casino, and you could register, and you got, you give it kind of a time frame. And then if you were there, you still had the opportunity to give comment. But I think it at least gives us a sense of, if the second period, the second hearing is going to be stacked, maybe we encourage some folks to go to a third one. I'm hoping there's that much interest in this. I think there will be, but I just want to make sure that people are given the opportunity to be heard.
Very helpful. Thank you. And Dan, that's all I had on the public hearings. I know Todd Spalding, head of SCUPA, had a question on a different topic from earlier. Todd?
Sorry, great, go ahead. Thank you.
All right. One of the things that I saw missing from the plans, or at least I didn't see when I was looking at them, was the massive amount of debt tied to housing. How is that going to be handled at the universities that are going to be integrating?
So this is actually one of the issues that will be introduced in the plan. I addressed it earlier as, there are a number of financial challenges that we face. There's obviously a number of questions have been raised over the last several years, but certainly intensively over the last several weeks about what our needs are and what funding levels would be required to address them. And that's what I was speaking to before about including in the work a kind of categorized list of needs, as it were, and levels of funding that would be required to address them. And debt service relief would certainly be in that list. The formal answer to your question, if I may, is that we have debt and we're kind of obligated to pay it off. Obviously, that debt can be taken over through a variety of means by the state, for example, which would relieve us of where that debt is taken over of having to pay the debt service. It is particularly challenging at universities where the debt service is in buildings and in functions that are funded wholly on the basis of student occupancy or student-driven revenues. And obviously, where where student enrollments decline, it is increasingly difficult to pay the debt service. Because that experience is not uniform across our system, the sense of urgency is also not uniform across the system, but it is significant and serious at several of our universities, as you know.
Thank you. And I did have one other question, if I may. How are we reaching the students that I would call the hidden students at the universities for their opinions on things? The students that probably need our services the most to succeed at the universities often don't respond to surveys and aren't usually in leadership roles. So how are we getting their feedback on the plans, how it's going to affect them?
Yeah, I'm going to turn to colleague presidents, but just to expand your question if I can, Todd, because it's not just students that are hidden. Faculty and staff are also, often hidden. And I think this is a really important point. It's, one tends to hear from the folks who are, I'm going to use the word activists in a non-judgmental way, who are engaged, put it that way. And the broad group isn't, and I think that's something which challenges all of us. But let me turn to Dale, Bashar, Bob, and Charles, who I think have been dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, and maybe ask them to illuminate us on some of the approaches they've been taking. In any order. But I'll call
I can speak to the way we've handled inclusivity on our campus. We have a meeting that we call the executive cabinet, which we've opened up to not just the president's cabinet, which is my direct reports, but all of our directors, chairs, deans, others that have kind of manager or leadership responsibilities. But we also invite to that larger cabinet all faculty, all staff to participate, especially through Zoom. It's easy just to log on, participate in that discussion. And as part of a standing agenda item, we go through in the past verbally all the updates that have that our lead working group leads and co-leads are developing as part of integration. As that became a bit routine. We provided that in writing in advance to the groups so they could see all the continued progress that the work groups, subgroups, and in some case sub-subgroups were making towards integration. We have open communication again as we look at tackling the questions. And of course, we have a number of forums. The most recent one we had was all alumni. We invited all alumni to come and listen to the kind of the state of the university as we look at sustainability planning, but also updates on integration.
Dan, I'm happy to go next. And this is Bashar. Please forgive me for not being on video. My internet connection is unstable. We did similar things in the Northeast, both at Bloomsburg and Lock Haven. We have leadership council at Bloomsburg, which is my direct reports and their direct reports, and integration is a standing agenda item. And now we've moved to bi-weekly updates, written updates to the campus community, including all students. Upon arrival to Lock Haven, Charles and I actually did a town hall meeting for students of all 3 universities together. And then we moved into town hall meetings for each university. So we've had multiple town hall meetings with students and stakeholders. I had an alumni town hall meeting with Lock Haven in late April and repeated that in early May for Bloomsburg. So we've tried to really be inclusive with all stakeholders to make sure that their questions were answered. And this is difficult. But we're trying to be as inclusive in every aspect of a plan in the Northeast.
We've done very similar things in the West. I'll defer to Bob for what's going on at Cal, but in the Northwest part of the state, in addition to all of those strategies, we also have had focus groups with students. We've developed student advisory boards. We've also worked with the various leaders of students to do reach outs and almost like a snowballing effect so that we could get to those underserved populations. Todd, we also use, you're at Clarion, we use tea time and multi ways of communicating with our students. And even to regard like today with this open forum workshop, the opportunity for letting people know on campus every single time there's an opportunity for input. To Representative Briggs's comment about people having an opportunity to speak up, some people are extremely uncomfortable in public forums speaking. So to provide those students who might really not be as comfortable to do that, that's why the website and other forums are so important, and to keep it constant and keep it going. We've become pretty comfortable at Edinburgh and Clarion with tea time. It's not a tea party, as the chancellor described before, but it's really an informal open forum for people to just ask questions and also get updates. We do that very consistently and they're well attended. So, but Todd, if you have any more ideas, because I know you work with a lot of students who may be hesitant to come forward. If you have ideas for more reach outs, please let us know. Bob?
So Todd, in California, as my colleagues have shared, we have used similar methods by which to communicate and provide some open dialogue regarding integration. All of what has been shared from cabinet level to a university leadership council process. We have had a student campus talk. We have a faculty staff convocation. And we have, with our student leaders, I've had a very consistent cadence with that group, meeting every 2 weeks with all the student leaders across the campus to share information about integration. We've invited then all of our co-leads to those discussions with the students to ensure that they get answers to the questions they have. We have a fairly consistent, robust communication, on a bi-weekly basis or at least monthly basis to our students and our staff. We've also meet with our leaders of our various unions on campus. We have a very strong, cadence with them on a monthly basis, and Dale and I have met with the union presidents of all those unions very consistently since early this year. So there's been a lot of opportunity for engagement. And of course, we still get a lot of information by email from various staff and students regarding this. So, and we have an active website that, has a Q&A out there to answer a lot of the questions as well. So.
One thing we forgot to mention, also, we do a weekly update to the students. It's a blitz that goes out at Edinburgh once a week. They told us loud and clear they didn't want a lot of websites and a lot of fact sheets. And so they just wanted, what do we need? Send it out, send it through email. And so we've been doing that consistently, and that's been also very helpful.
Thank you, Dale. And we're doing the same thing in the Northeast there, small bits of information on a weekly basis to all students.
Yeah, we call it Integration Insights.
That's exactly what it's called.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised right now.
I'm sorry, it's not a tea party.
Oh, there's Representative Briggs.
Sorry about that, guys. I've been kind of thinking about this during the last little bit, and we talk a lot about the outreach from the schools, of the 6 schools that are on the plan. Is there a broader effort to hear from students that might not be as directly affected, but are part of the system? That is something that I'm curious to see what kind of outreach has been done to our other students.
So I can speak to a few things. First of all, the student survey that we'll be putting in the field imminently does go broadly across the public sector and higher education generally in Pennsylvania. I'm looking at Randy and see if he's nodding his head furiously in the other direction because he's closer to that than I am. So we'll get input, not just from current, but prospective students. And I think that's also really important because they're our future, obviously.
And their parents.
And their parents, yeah. So that's important. The second thing is that we have, obviously, through our various channels, reached into the, we have formal ways of reaching into the student body, which we do. I meet with the presidents of the Student Government Association. I meet with the presidents of all of our student governments every month. And they've been very active, frankly. This last cohort has been incredibly helpful and active in reaching deeply into their community and coming back with really good commentary. It's interesting to me, Ken, I'm going to give a shout out to your Augustino, to your student now graduated, who was president of the Association of Student Government Presidents and was very active in encouraging himself, but also in encouraging his peers to gather input so that they're not just representing themselves, but genuinely representing the student voice. So that's also been very important as well. There may be, if there are other avenues to gather input from students beyond the formal and then the advisory structures, obviously, where we've had folks involved, obviously ask presidents to speak to them.
Well, and one other note, Dan, before the presidents chime in, you also talked about this extensively in your campus tours. Specifically, you raised it at each of the campus tours where the integrations were not potentially happening. You talked about why integrations matters to the whole system.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I just think this is a historic opportunity for the system. And never have I talked to more of my colleagues about what I do as a board of governor. And I think it's an opportunity to, not just to try to get integration right, but deal with sustainability and investment and dealing with the debt. I mean, it is, the broader we could have engagement in that conversation. I want to thank you all the presidents who talked about the efforts they have been doing to reach out to the students. I think this is kind of a unique opportunity we have to really amplify the need to do something for the future of the system. So thank you for letting me ask that.
And Melissa Bauer from PACT has her hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the fact that up here in Clarion, we were hearing a lot of rumors and how bad integration was. And we took a very proactive approach and started to meet with our local community leadership. And Dr. Dale and her staff put together a wonderful piece. And we sat down with our county commissioners. We sat down with our chamber of business and leadership. And then we also went to our Clarion County Economic Development Corporation. And we wanted to make sure that they were aware of kind of the why behind why this is better for our students and why it's better for the region. And we found that to just give us a lot of feedback, and also it helped to really nullify the bad rumors that were out there. And it was an enlightening experience. I don't know if Dale wants to talk any more about it, but I suggest anybody that's in this to start and do some outreach to the community too.
Yeah, I agree. And the Jim Geiger and Angie Burrows and Chris Kindle from Communications put together information sheets to be distributed to alumni, to businesses, to local leaders, to leadership. It's been very helpful. Rumors were just swirling, and people were just kind of saying, oh, I heard this, I heard that, I heard this. And none of it was, well, most of it was not founded in reality. So those conversations were very helpful. It was also very important that the Council of Trustee leadership was with us when we had conversations. I cannot speak to the importance of that. I can't underscore it more. It was very important that we came in as a conversation. And the questions were very helpful, good conversations, and we were able to incorporate that feedback into our information sheets. We're doing something very similar up at Borough as well.
And one other thing, Dale, we also met with the local school leadership, the high school leadership and the advisors, because another thing I was hearing was things that, well, maybe Clarion won't offer this program or something similar. And I thought that was key that Clarion, and I know you told us that Edinburgh too was going out and talking to the opinion leaders, to the students out there.
Yeah, and as the academic array becomes more solid and we're able to actually start to create information for the high school counselors and for families and students, potential students, that we're going to have to do a blitz if this is approved right in July, so that information gets to our seniors and juniors who are considering college options. So yeah, it's very important work. A lot of moving parts, but the community leaders have been very helpful in giving us feedback. And so that's been a good part of the process.
And then I have one final point, and I've made this before, and that is that financial stability does not equal education quality. And I think that's really important when the BOG discuss what's going on at local universities, and they don't have those things. They don't have that conflated. It needs to be the education quality at Clarion, Edinburgh, and California are excellent. And they are accredited. The faculty is excellent. And we need to make sure that message still gets across and out there, along with the Northeast group too. And thanks, Randy.
And President Hanna has the hand up.
Thank you, Randy. And just a quick comment regarding Representative Briggs' questions regarding outreach to students. In the Northeast, Representative, we actually administered a survey to all students focusing on the program array and the delivery method of the courses. And the academic leadership, the provosts and deans, are taking that feedback and incorporating that into their decisions as to what courses and what programs, what courses and how they're going to be delivered. So we really have been incredibly inclusive as getting the most important set of stakeholder, the students, in the delivery of the curriculum moving forward. So to your point, I think it's critical that we continue that engagement with our students.
All right, Madam Chair. Go ahead, Dan.
Just a quick, I wanted to just amplify, I think, the point that Representative Briggs has made. I mean, you know, frankly, I don't think anybody necessarily sort of planned it in this way, but this has been a tremendous opportunity over the last few months to really amplify the importance of the Pennsylvania state system of higher education and its universities, the role that we play as engines of social mobility and economic development across the state within communities. I think the challenges that we face, the importance of student affordability, the critical importance of state continued investment and expanded investment. It's been an incredibly rich conversation. Certainly the parts that I've been involved in, I frankly want to sort of acknowledge the engagement of members of the General Assembly and the governor and the governor's staff, really kind of getting their arms around public higher education and its criticality for the future of the state. I think that's a good thing. And I think to the points that have been raised, we should do everything we can to use that platform, not just to talk about our criticality and the importance, but also to talk about the quality and the fact that we, and it's been really sort of moving and, emails that I'm party to and the sort of students that I speak to and the alumni that I speak to will testify, passionately, powerfully to the role that the universities have played in shaping and changing their lives and the lives of their communities. So that's a really important message. So I just want to thank you as board members and Melissa as a trustee for bringing it up and encourage you to continue to deliver that message. It's really important.
Madam Chair, we have no other hands raised right now.
All right, well, I appreciate it. This really has been a very a terrific discussion. Excellent questions. I know the entire board really appreciates the work, Dan, of you and the entire team in terms of not just the substance, but the process. The process is so critically important. I that what's been done are acknowledged, collated. The ones that are actionable are dealt with in terms of updating and editing the plan going forward. It's great work, and I know we'll continue to see it going forward. And of course, I encourage the public to keep reading and keep sending in comments, because obviously we take them very seriously, and we they're making their way into the drafts. I also would just close by I was going to say what Dan said, so I won't repeat the whole thing, but Tim, I think you raised such a great point, and Melissa too. I mean, this has been a real opportunity to get the state system to the front burner and on people's really on people's radar, not just in our legislature, but in our communities and across the Commonwealth. And we, for so many years, we quietly go about doing our job, being the largest single entity educator, right, of higher education students in the Commonwealth. And certainly when there are problems, we get noticed, but the incredible good work that happens every single day doesn't necessarily. And this is really a tremendous opportunity not to, just talk about sustainability, but to talk about the importance of the system and what it delivers, and how we all have a stake in it. So really, Tim, thank you for bringing that up. That's really what the big opportunity is here. And I appreciate it. So we're going to have another board workshop in June before the July board meeting, so that the board gets another chance to have and talk about and ask questions about the most up-to-date information regarding what the plan is looking like, what the public comment is, what the results of the public hearings were. So we look forward to that. We look forward, I hope, I think and hope we will be able to do a similar process as we did now, because as Dan has said, we really are committed to transparency and bringing everybody who's interested along right as we go along in developing these plans. And anything that we can do to make this process even more open, even more inclusive, please do not hesitate to let us know your thoughts. And we'll take it, we'll do to the extent possible, everything we can, to follow suggestions. So again, thank you everyone for being here today. And I think our workshop is concluded. Have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend.